Webinar on navigating the current downturn. I'm Brian DeLaite, Vice President of Marketing Solutions at LS Direct, and I'll be your moderator today. We have registrations for today's webinar from brands spanning from New England to Southern California and all points in between. Thank you all for joining us. We have a great panel, and I'm very excited to have them share their insights and experiences with us today. For those of you that may not be familiar with LS Direct, let me tell you a little bit about us. Printing on our own digital presses, we specialize in highly personalized, highly relevant, small format direct mail solutions that are data driven for customer retention, reactivation, and new customer acquisition. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panelists and let them tell us a little bit about themselves. We'll go alphabetically here from Al to Brian to Mark. So Al, take over.
Great, I'm Al Bessin. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Circa Lighting. We're a omni-channel business. We've got an online presence and then currently 15 showrooms across the US and believe it or not, 7 in the middle of construction right now. For the most part, halted during this period of time. We serve the luxury designer-inspired lighting community, selling both B2B and B2C in this country and also internationally. One of the locations we're building out right now is in London.
Great, thanks. Brian?
Hey, I'm Brian Tsung. I'm the Senior Vice President of Brand Marketing for FRONTGATE. We are a specialty retailer in the home furnishings area. We're part of the Cornerstone Brands. We have a very large direct-to-consumer business, a small fleet of stores, and B2B. So my span of responsibilities include the website, all traffic going to the site, print, digital, PR, as well as creative.
Hi, I'm Mark Friedman. I'm president of Details Interactive consultancy, helping direct-to-consumer businesses focus on driving revenue and generally growing their business. I've spent most of my career in direct-to-consumer, working in catalog, multi-title catalog businesses, as well as retailers. I was head of e-commerce at Steve Madden and have spent most of the last dozen or more years focused on digital commerce.
Great, thanks. Thanks a lot. You know, for Al and Brian to start, and I'll start with you, Al. How's business right now for you?
You know, for us, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Overall, we're doing okay. Our e-com business is exceptionally strong right now, as it is for a number of other e-com retailers. Our showrooms are all closed at the moment. Although our staff is working from home, and fortunately, because a significant part of our business is B2B, they're able to operate from home with their customers who are designers and builders, basically via lots and lots of Zoom meetings, FaceTime selection meetings, that sort of thing. So we're using all the tools we have. We're feeling, you know, a little bit of pain on the showroom side of it. And quite a bit of that is offset by the growth in e-com.
Great, great. Brian, how about you?
For us, business has been pretty good. We have our e-commerce business just doing really well. Our store isn't a large percentage of our overall revenue, so we didn't really have to overcome that. But the direct side, we're doing really well. And, you know, it's really, you know, that saying preparation meets opportunity. And right now, we've been preparing for this, you know, season. Outdoor is huge for us. We've been doing this a long time, and, you know, we spent the last 6-8 months for this season, and the opportunity has presented itself where people are at home and wanting to stay indoors, and our brand pillars are entertaining and hosting. So we had to pivot our messaging, but it's really about the home. And so, you know, the opportunity to present ourselves, we were prepared, and business has been pretty good.
Yeah, there's a lot of people sitting around right now in their homes and outside thinking about how they can make it more palatable for themselves while they're locked in. And Mark,
Right.
what are you hearing from folks in your network?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it has to do with vertical and also timing. So, you know, the first couple of weeks, the first 2 weeks, let's say, out of March 15th and the back half of the month were, I think, a struggle for many, especially on the apparel side of things. Apparel seems to have come back a bit. They're still, down generally speaking, but at least the ones I've talked to. But categories like we've heard here previously, anything around the home, how to make the home more comfortable. I've heard good things coming out of gardening, some other, backyard kinds of things. So kind of the essentials, things that people could put off because they're not going to be using, right now, are those things that are still struggling. But, look, most businesses, although they may have pushed very aggressively over the last few years on e-commerce, many of them are not making up their total sales or anywhere near their total sales if they had four-wall retail as well. So they're trying to service customers best they can. They're trying to move through inventory as much as they can. I think that's something, we'll wind up talking about here. But in general, it's kind of a mixed bag, some coming back and some, as we've heard, performing well.
Yeah, a lot of what we've seen with our clients was the first couple of weeks, or the last 2 weeks, I should say, of March, while people were still kind of getting their heads around things, were a little slow. And I think once people settled into the new normal, things stabilized a bit, and that's when people started to see, where applicable, like in home, things pick up a lot. So it's good to see. Before we get on any further, just a couple of housekeeping things I wanted to bring up. There is a Q&A panel button at the bottom of your screen. So please feel free to ask any questions, and we'll get to those towards the end of today's webinar. And also, just to let you know, we are recording this, so this may be available for you in the future. So before we go any further, I don't know, I'd like to put a poll up, a quick poll to get a sense from folks of how many years have you worked in retail marketing? I'd like to get a sense from each of you so we can understand who we're speaking to and how that's going. It's funny, we've all been in this business for 30 or more years, and that's a lot of ups and downs that we've all experienced, from 9/11 to Hurricane Sandy to the Great Recession and everything in between. So it's interesting how you can take other events and other experiences and apply them to real world situations like we're in today. I don't think any one of them is exactly similar to the other, but there are certain things you can cull from those experiences to help you navigate what's going on. So while we're waiting for those poll results to pop up, let's see, what do we have here? So we've got a nice cross section of folks that have been in the business for a varying amount of time. I think that anyone that's been in this business for 15 years or less probably hasn't been in a leadership role or been in a situation where they've had to deal with this type of a downturn. Mark, I'll start with you. What advice would you give to your younger self about navigating and leading through an economic downturn?
Don't go into retail.
Short and sweet.
I have had the experiences of all the downturns that you've talked about, and just using them as as the example. I think you've got to be open to change. You've got to force yourself to make change. I think there's a lot of things that businesses are seeing now they kind of wanted to tiptoe into, but were hesitant. We did a webinar about catalogs, and folks wanting to move out of catalogs and save advertising dollars and push it into digital. This may push that along. So I would have told my younger self to don't wait for tomorrow what you could do today if you think it's the right way forward. And there's a lot of businesses that we're seeing now that are sitting and tapping themselves on the head and saying, geez, why didn't I get more aggressive digital commerce? Why didn't I do some of the other, or learn more about the digital tactics from a marketing perspective that they all wish they had done now. So
Sure.
I think having tested new ideas and being more aggressive in the things that you you should have conviction, but maybe don't want to try. That would be something I would have told myself.
Sure. Brian, what about you?
So I was thinking about this, it would really depend on the company I was with at the time, because we were in different life stage of a business. I've been in some special situations where it's all about cash flow, and some situations where cash flow wasn't really an issue, right? It's all about, kind of to Mark's, like, what can you do to keep channels going and test? But the one thing I would give myself advice to the younger me was, you can only control what you can control, and don't really spend time worrying on things that you can't really do anything about, because then you just spin your wheels and create plans and, worry yourself about things that you don't really need to spend time about. And so it helps focus your energies on things you can really do and execute against, and, kind of, not compartmentalize the situation, but it helps you just keep focused and kind of moving forward.
Sure. Start chopping and keep chopping. So,
yeah.
Al, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think that for me, it's thinking about where you want to be and who you want to be on the other side, because these kinds of events are transformative, especially something like this that's as broad and widespread as it is. So obviously there are financial constraints, and those will always be a part of it, but really trying to imagine as best as possible where you want to end up on the other side, and try not to do things, sometimes you can't help it, but try not to do things that you will have to heavily walk back later on. It's sometimes you have this tendency to go into this reactive mode, and I think part of the deciding factor, certainly part of it is financial, but part of it also needs to be, what's it going to look like when I have to walk this back?
Sure. Necessity is the mother of all invention, right? And that's the kind of situation we're in. I think about how, just from a work from home standpoint, I was reading something the other day where Zoom had 10 million users in December and 200 million users in March. So, we've all done what we've had to do to keep moving forward. I'd like to get back to something, Mark touched on a little bit before. There is a school of thought that the lockdown has accelerated the downward spiral of both brick and mortar retail and catalog marketing by as much as 5 years. Do you agree with that statement? I'll start with you, Al.
I would say yes. I mean, I've been one of those people, and I've been in specialty retail for 30 some odd years, and I've been one of those people that's been saying for the last decade or so that there's this spectrum from the large serval kind of discount driven, the Walmart, Target world, and certainly to some degree the Amazon world online. And the other end of the spectrum is highly specialized retail that are very expert at their niche and have a tendency to be very customer driven, customer sensitive. In between, that business model, I think, has been on shaky ground for some time. Witness Sears, witness the difficulty with some of the department stores, certainly some of the malls, kind of the non-differentiated retail channel, I think most definitely will see some acceleration of demise during this period of time.
Brian, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with the retail piece. And on the catalog side, I don't know if there's a demise of it, but we have to be cognizant of like LSC. They just filed bankruptcy. So what happens when you have a major printer go out of business or reduce their services? And how do you as a brand react to that? Because if they're not printing, it's not like you can go quickly to somebody else and get your books put in the mail. So I do think, from my point of view, we have to be a little more differentiated in our marketing approach and not be so reliant on catalog just in case an LSC does go out of business.
Sure. Mark?
Yeah, I don't know if I can put a timetable, to 5 years or how much of it's accelerated, but, clearly on the catalog side of things, Brian's comment about LSC, I don't believe they're going out of business. They're going to be smaller. They'll have, less capacity, probably taking, capacity out that they didn't really need in the first place. On the retail side, I've always been, I didn't coin this, but, I don't think that retail is dead. I think bad retail is dead, and I think that, this will force people to really, rethink about the store experience and the fact that over these years, we've taken so much customer service out of retail. I think you're going to see a move back to a better customer experience. I've read a lot about in the last couple of days about, concierge time, having to make appointments to go into retail stores. I don't know exactly how that's going to play, but you'll definitely see lots of change. And, look, we're going to see, wholesale, really the whole landscape of wholesale change because the department stores are going to continue to, or are going to perhaps change how many of them we have. So it's this trickle down thing that really worries me. You've got mall stores, the anchor stores struggling, puts the overall mall in jeopardy. So you've got, 2 or 3 major mall owners in the country, and you worry about that. And then what does that trickle down to the specialty retail?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it seems that brands that have both wholesale and D2C business models are probably going to be challenged the most, particularly on the wholesale side, because a lot of the stores in those malls may not make it. So I think you'll see a much bigger shift to that D2C approach, and that's where their online marketing efforts are going to be even more important. We've been talking internally about even retail store events. So you think about the big, President's Day sale or Memorial Day weekend sale. And I think there's going to be a lot less emphasis on those types of things as people continue to practice social distancing. Now, whether that's for the next couple of years or that's, forever, I don't know the answer to. I tend to think it's more short term than long term. But in that effort, how do you market to people, and how do you continue to generate revenue? And I think more of the day-to-day trickle of customer retention marketing and different types of programs that have a steadier cadence as opposed to just pushing people all at once into the malls. I think you're going to get to a point where people are going to drive to a mall after these things are everything's open again, and they're going to see a bunch of cars there, and they're going to turn around and leave. They're not going to want to go inside. So it's an interesting thing. Speaking of retailers and catalogers, they have to reassess, and we talked about, Brian, you touched on it a little bit earlier, reassessing how they use the catalog moving forward. What do you think the approach is going to be short term for the balance of this year, and then maybe moving forward longer term?
For the catalog, for us, when late March, I would say, when the market started to go down, was that mid-March, and then everyone was kind of staying at home. Business was super bad. We started to really trim our budgets, and catalog was kind of the place to go. We have we just created a list of decision dates and what do we do and how do we do it, and then we just started to go and knock them off the list. And short term, we were cutting print, but we left the back half of the year intact, knowing that, maybe things will come back and we don't really have to make a decision then. So we haven't really impacted our Q3, Q4 marketing plans yet, given, we're just trying to get to, what was going to happen in week 1 of April. And so short term, we definitely were making some adjustments, but long term, we were trying to stick to our marketing plans because we didn't really have to make a decision yet.
Sure. Al, what are your thoughts on that?
I think, first of all, for our business, we don't do traditional catalogs. We do something we call a lookbook, which is an inspiration piece. And for us in our industry, that works exceptionally well. We, as we measure response to that, it has an extremely long tail. And part of that's because of our business and home decor. People have a tendency to pin things or bookmark things for a long period of time. We see a lot of value still in pieces like that. Having come from the catalog industry originally, mean, the writing's been on the wall for a long, long time that it's all about targeting, it's all about effectiveness, it's all about focus. And I think that just ups the ante to the next level. I don't think catalog as a medium is defunct. I think it certainly has evolved to some degree, and I think it will continue to evolve a long ways. You know, unfortunately, when you look at the print industry in general, we deal with a lot of magazines, and you can see what a conundrum that industry is in, because what they haven't done is they haven't figured out how to adapt to that environment. They haven't thought outside the box of the traditional model they're in. And I think most catalogers are much further along the road in terms of understanding how they need to morph that medium and integrate it with the other media.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of people reach out to us that, want to cut down on the cadence of their catalogs, and we don't really focus on catalogs. Everything we do is small format. So we're kind of filling the cracks there in between catalog mailings with more relevant, targeted mailings, small format pieces that really speak to people individually. So it's more about your relationship, your one-to-one relationship with the customer, which I think in the long run just builds a better relationship for the long run there. Mark, I know you had a webinar earlier in the week with the folks at Namoa about the catalog side of things. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, so I don't think catalogs are dead. I think that there's still a use for them. You've got tons of businesses. When we thought that catalogs were dead 10 years ago, they got somewhat revived because you had all these digitally native businesses that now all of a sudden started mailing more. I think you'll see to Al's point, hopefully some more personalization and better targeting and better focus. Think of emails in kind of the batch and blast environment. That's not all that efficient. Customers don't really want that. They want to have something that really more talks to them more effectively. I think we'll be forced to do that, from a book perspective. Mm-hmm. But, I think, and I said this, in that other webinar, it really comes down to being able to have a better understanding about where your marketing dollars are, where the efficiency is of your marketing dollars. I don't think you have to be just catalog. You don't have to just be digital or store, but you really need to know if you're putting that extra dollars on the table, where should it go and to generate the best ROI. And just too many brands don't have their arms around attribution and know where to spend that next dollar.
Sure. So it's spending good money after bad in some cases, instead of looking at which programs are incremental to each other and how they all fit together. I agree. Before we go any further, I do want to put up another quick poll for us, for everyone that's watching, to get a sense of what type of retailer do you work for? Are you primarily brick and mortar, catalog, e-commerce, or both? Give everyone a minute or two to respond. And while we're doing that, I know we had a couple of questions from the panel I'll answer next, actually for Q&A questions. So, while everyone is voting, what do we got? Most people are in both, which is no surprise. Good to see. We've got a nice cross section of folks here. And from the Q&A, the first question we got today was from Gina Zarilli at Cheryl's Cookies. For those of us in businesses that have been strong during the pandemic, in my case, food gifting, does your experience tell you that we'll be able to retain the new customers we're bringing into our business? And if so, what do you recommend to keep them with our brand? I'll start with you, Brian, on that question.
Sure, it's a great question. We're looking at it now. Are the new customers we're getting currently different than the customers we were getting before? Quick answer is they seem to be slightly the same, buying from the same category. So it's really all boats are rising in our case. So we are looking to see, well, do we put them on a special customer journey? You know, one of the things, you know, kind of related to the catalog is like, well, can we start training these folks to be, you know, digitally oriented and not need a catalog, or, you know, can we hit them with print pieces? So we're trying to look at that. So our retention and repeat rates are, you know, because of our price points, it's a little longer out. You know, we're, you know, probably, you know, with home furnishings, our price points, it's a little further out. So we're not really looking at, okay, what are we going to get them to repeat in the next, you know, 60 days? We're kind of saying, well, what is it going to be in the next, you know, 6 months? So that's, I don't know if I'm answering that question the best way, but we're going to put them, understand who they are, what are they buying. They're not buying anything different than they normally would before COVID. So we're going to put them into our normal, you know, retention streams, which is pretty much catalog and email. But then we're all going to start holding out test groups and saying, well, can we do them digitally versus catalog, and kind of taking this opportunity to test different things.
And Al, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a great opportunity on the consumer side of it. I think once you recognize a buyer, you know, working hard to build a relationship. Now, some of it revolves around what your anticipated lifetime value and your average order value and your margins are on the transactions. In our particular case, because our average order values are so high and our lifetime values are high, particularly in the quasi-professional design community, where they'll have future jobs and that sort of thing, we actually put them on a direct outreach program and really try hard to build that relationship. Well, one thing that we've discovered is relationship is almost half the equation in our business. You know, if they trust you, they believe you, when you send them something, they read what you send them and that sort of thing. If we can build that credibility, we're all over it.
And Mark, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, specific to the food. So this was Cheryl Cookie's question. You know, I think it's a little bit different, perhaps in Brian's, you know, case, or even in Al's case. You know, these are customers who, you know, it wasn't an essential thing, but they started thinking about, you know, how can I spend some time? In the Cheryl's Cookies case, you know, I'm sure it's a mix of people struggling to actually get food. Maybe they just want to, you know, have cookies, but because around the country it was so difficult to get food at local stores, people asked, you know, not to go out. I think people went to the online providers of just day-to-day, you know, food items. So it would be interesting to know whether people were, you know, trying to make other people happy. In Cheryl's case, Cheryl's Cookies case, to give gifts. Was it for self-consumption? And was it for self-consumption strictly because I needed some food in the house, or because I wanted to splurge? But I'd carve those people out separately. I track them over time and see if their lifetime value is in fact, you know, differently. And I would also take and we should do this with all new customers, really try hard to educate them about the brand and your values of your brand and what you stand for. And maybe you'll be able to keep them.
Yeah, you know, there's one way of really looking at the splits of ship-to addresses for those purchases to see, you know, where they're going and how does that align with what you typically see. So is it typically 80% different ship-to address than the billing address, and is it now 50-50? So those are interesting things to track as well. It's a good point. You know, we talk about the importance of relevant messaging to your customers and prospects and how that ties into what's going on right now. Can you think of anyone that's really on point with that? Does anyone stand out for any of you? And I'll start with you, as being really on point with their messaging.
You know, that's a tough one. I mean, I'm seeing little bright spots all over the place, but at the same time, a lot of confusion. I think, so I'm not going to directly answer the question, maybe answer it indirectly and state that I think having active communication and active messaging and being responsive and having people being all over the moment in terms of interacting with customers, whether it's on social media, you know, responsive kind of media where you can react quickly, I think is really, really important. I think we're seeing in our industry a lot of people who are winning because they're out in front. They're telling it like it is. They're showing their people, they're expressing empathy, and which at the same time is helping drive the brand culture that they have.
Yeah. Mark, do you have anyone that stands out for you right now?
No, not any one in particular. I think we've gone through phases, though, and maybe I'm not going to answer your question either. But the first couple of weeks, everybody came out and said, we really we care about our employees, we care about our consumers, and we're doing this. We're taking all the the precautions. Everybody kind of carbon copied, the same message. We got past that. I think retailers are still struggling to figure out what is the right message. It was the same thing after 9/11. When can I, start, saying things? When can I be promotional? When can I not necessarily make believe, but when can I stop talking about it and almost making believe that it didn't happen? I think that, you want to be sensitive. We've had so many people pass away, but, still lots of people have recovered, and we have the rest of the economy to support. So I think retailers are struggling with the balance of the message. But it feels like, I get tons of emails. It seems like we've moved away from that COVID message and more about, these are my products, here's my brand, and here's my message.
Yeah, I remember early on, I saw some grumbling from folks, if I get another email from another store CEO telling me how much he cares about me, or she cares about me and what we're doing to protect our employees. No, enough already. Brian, your thoughts? Anyone you can think of that's really hitting it?
I thought we did it well. But,
there you go. That's what I was looking
select
for.
Yourself, Brian.
Honesty.
Well, honestly, one of the first things we did, right? So it was like Wednesday, everything was shutting down. First thing we did was, okay, what is our COVID response going to be customer facing, right? So how do we address it? The second thing we did is we combed through all of our assets. Our brand pillars were about hosting and entertaining, right? And that wasn't happening. So how do we subtly pivot the message from hosting and entertaining to kind of more of a stay at home, staycation, kind of making your home more of a spa, relax, more something that's, we're nodding to what's happening, but not calling out exactly, the pandemic, but more about the new customer lifestyle. Like, hey, you're at home. How do you make it as comfortable as possible? What are the simple things you can do to refresh? So that's something that we try to do. So anything that was hosting or entertaining or parties or anything like that, we went through hundreds and hundreds of assets, especially in email, because we do a lot of personalization. We combed through everyone and said, edit this out, edit that out. Anything that had to do with gatherings, we made sure we took out. And so we were more about, what do you do about while you're in your home, game nights, organization, solutions. So we started to create campaigns around that. So not to pat ourselves on the back, but that's how we try to respond to it.
I also, in the travel space, I think Hilton Hotels did a good job of hitting it. Their campaign was "We will travel again." I thought that was an uplifting message, given how the travel industry has come to a screeching halt for all intents and purposes right now. I'm going to shift focus a little bit here and just talk a little bit about the marketing mix a little bit more. And whenever things get tight, the finance department gets a little bit more involved in marketing decisions, and the CFOs start becoming marketing experts, which can cause problems for people. But there is definitely a fine line between finance, giving you a budget and kind of setting a direction for you, and versus telling you exactly where to cut and where to spend your money. So to shift your dollars, where do you cut right now? Where do you shift your spend? And with a leaner budget, what do you focus on? Mark brought it up a little bit earlier about finding what's working and what isn't working. Where do you find those complementary solutions that aren't going to potentially cannibalize each other? And Brian, I'll start with you.
So I'll start where we cut, local marketing in store areas. We cut that. We try to get out of ads. So that was something, all events were cut. So a lot of PR and event marketing was sort of the first to go. Kind of like always. That's the first thing you cut, unfortunately. Then we went and looked at, okay, we have pre-match back, post-match back, fractional allocation. I mean, like, we look at it every way. It's almost like raw demand, attributed. I mean, we look at it so many different ways, it's almost confusing, right? So what we did know is digital was working. So we're feeding that pretty heavily right now. And it's just interesting because, finance does come in and they look at it, line 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have this thing called direct load. And how do you allocate that? And, I've been trying to educate them, like, just look at the total. Don't look at, it's like sausage. Tastes great. You don't want to know what's in it. And the same thing about my marketing lines. It's like, just worry about the total. And once you get the trust there, then you're able to invest into these different areas. So for us right now, it's, we did cut back on the catalog temporarily. We try to keep all prospecting in place, right? So we are making sure we're feeding new customers to the file. So that's something we're definitely doing. And digital is the easiest lever right now to pull. And whether it's paid search or affiliates or whatever it is, we're kind of balancing where we can get the best ROI.
So Boomerang is part of your digital budget, is what you're saying?
It's my print budget, which we are feeding heavily.
Just wanted to ask. So,
Yeah.
Al, to you, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So, some of it, obviously for us, local marketing that we did sort of self-selected, and it was a pretty big line item spend for us. So that went away. We've actually tried to replace that, and I think pretty successfully, with doing a lot more online events, something that we'll probably take beyond this and explore even more thoroughly, because we spent quite a bit on local events. So we may replace some of those with more online events. The other thing that we've done with search, we sort of refined search, did a combination of negotiating some better rates. I think it was a good time to negotiate better rates on some of the services that we have, and also shifted to refine our non-branded term search and get much more specific. And we've had some really nice results from that side of it. Cut back on some of our branded term search, which wasn't a tremendous savings for us, but we don't seem to see much of a negative impact on that side. I think we have pretty strong brand recognition already anyway in our segment.
And Mark, what are your thoughts with that?
Well, since I'm not running a brand these days, I don't have the headache that Brian and Al having to deal with. But look, I think they covered the right things, and it goes back to what I said before. If you didn't have the information, I mean, there's logical stuff, about the local advertising, in store trade areas. You don't. Though I will say, I've seen some brands, continue to do some TV advertising that surprised me. Now they're digitally native brands that then ultimately opened up retail. So I guess they were believing that either they couldn't get out of the ad or it was of value to drive people, online. I was a little surprised though, but take out the local stuff. But if you didn't know what your ROI was and which were your most effective channels before, it makes your decision of what to cut now a lot more difficult.
Yeah. We actually were working with a national women's apparel retailer we're already planning the rollout of reopening stores with them and how we're going to engage with them with direct mail. In a regional sense, you're starting with places down in the south, and as areas start to open up, we're going to be front and center for them, letting their customers know that their stores are open again, and whether that means scheduling an appointment to come in or whatever the case may be, they want to be ahead of the curve with it. We do have one more poll we wanted to bring up. Speaking of marketing mix and budget shifts, how have you changed your marketing budgets? I'd be interested to hear from those of you that are on the webinar today, where you fall within these 5 segments.
Hey, Brian, if I may, your comment about helping stores open up. I saw a great post from on LinkedIn done by Kohl's, They put together an entire, I think it was called, or maybe it was Kroger. So on the grocery side, but I think a lot of the tactics that they put out there, it was kind of their game plan of how to reopen. So, I think there's a lot of content out there now for people who are in retail. You may have your own ideas, but it's always good to see what else other people are doing. It might help inform you.
Yeah, to add to that, I think it's going to be different by market too, because there's different rules going to be for different markets, and what does that mean? So it's going to be highly personalized, I guess, to the actual market.
And do we have the poll results up here? So as you can see, not surprisingly, 74% decreased overall budget, and this is a multiple choice question, so you could answer more than once. But that pretty much holds true with what we've seen with our clients as well on that front. So, it seems like, where do I want to go with this next? I think that getting back to digital for a minute, what's different in the digital ad space now as compared to the Great Recession in 08-09? How has it evolved since then? Where does social media fit into all that? I'll start with you, Mark.
Yeah, well, so social media was almost, I don't want to say non-existent, but certainly wasn't anywhere near getting the kinds of funding that it gets today. And it's still, in most businesses, only a small portion of the spend. So, there's so many more people engaged there. There's more dollars being spent, more content and time being put out there. So that's clearly one, difference. And ask your question again, Brian.
How is the digital ad space different as compared to 08-09?
Right. So you've got
outside of social.
Yeah. So you got the social, and then also the marketplaces are so much more prominent than it was previously, and there's lots of dollars. So for brands that are spending, they're obviously doing their Google and their affiliate marketing and all that other stuff, but many of them are spending quite a lot of money on Amazon to win the buy box. And that's, obviously one of the other big differences.
Yeah, I've seen where the cost of digital have gone up anywhere from 50 to 200%, depending on, what you're doing there. Brian, what are your thoughts as far as how that?
Cross-device tracking is big for us, right? With the mobile, it's really impacting. Our mobile traffic is skyrocketed, right? And then, being able to do cross-device tracking and with your ad campaigns, it's kind of another look at it that wasn't here, a few years ago. So, and then data privacy, we're not getting all the data that we would want from like Facebook. They just give you raw demand, and it's hard to kind of put it through your machine. So different sources of data are, there's some boundaries and walls up against, so you have to make a lot of assumptions. So I think as new social platforms and, marketing channels come into play, how do you put it through your machine is a lot different now. And then you have the devices, right? So mobile versus desktop. So that's another thing that makes it a lot different.
Yeah, and now, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and I'll be a little off point on that, just and maybe answer more broadly and say that I think what we see accelerating is this migration to a much more personalized communication, social media, shift of spend, shift of focus, shift of emphasis in that particular direction for our space. And again, our space is a little bit unique compared to some other ones.
Yeah, speaking of the shifts in spend, another thing to look at is from a promotion standpoint, is just product and product availability. We've had people that have reached out to us that have talked about doing a different, a smaller format, maybe an 8-page catalog with us, because the 96-page catalog they were going to do had a product in it from China or India that they just weren't sure they were going to even be able to get. You know, from a supply chain standpoint, you know, what are your thoughts on I mean, for you, Brian, particularly in your business, you know, what are you doing to think about, you know, how much product you're going to have available for Q3?
Right. I mean, we're figuring that out now. We have countries shutting down factories, and our supply chain is definitely an issue. How do we, you know, not that we want to throttle back demand, but it's almost like we got to throttle certain categories back because we just don't want to disappoint the customer. And then as we look at Q3, Q4, you know, what does that mean to what we actually offer? You know, what does that mean to, you know, page counts and things like that? So those are all the things we're trying to figure out now is you know, how does supply chain kind of lead our marketing activities? So
yeah, much different than typical. Right?
Foresee, you know, a lot of up to sales going on for a lot of retailers as they kind of pulse different things here and there. So,
and think about the big retailers that are going to have so much spring inventory that they couldn't move, and you know, and then their typical. I'm thinking more, you know, in an apparel sense, the summer and fall merchandise that they're not going to be able to get. And how does that? How
summer 2020 is going to be summer 2021.
There's literally
there's different year.
Tens of thousands of stores out there with merchandise sitting in them right now that haven't been opened for 5 or 6 weeks. Al, what are you seeing from Circa Lighting?
Yeah, on the supply chain side of it, really our efforts started, you know, with the tariff situation, and we were heavily investing in diversifying our product sourcing across a broader range of countries. That takes a long time to execute that, but that was something that we were well on the road with. I mean, you know, a couple of years ago, most of our product was manufactured in China with some factories that we had very, very long relationships with. And so making any kinds of changes and that sort of thing are very, very difficult. But it's, you know, it's certainly a concern, and was certainly a concern this year, you know, particularly when, you know, when China was at the leading edge of a lot of the pandemic right now.
What are folks telling you, Mark?
I think Brian's right. You know, the whole thought of summer 2020 is really summer 2021. You know, it's certain product categories, you know, let's say in furniture, in his business, you know, you can push that out, and, you know, the products, you know, there's always an introduction of new products, but they don't change necessarily all that much from a fashion perspective. You know, if you're a fashion brand, now all of a sudden you have to at least rationalize to yourself, you know what, short skirts, let's say, you know, short skirts were in the spring and the summer, you better hope that you now create the belief that short skirts are going to be in 2021, and that somebody who's the fashion maven doesn't decide now it's 3/4 skirts or, you know, knee length. So I think that's a real problem. And there's going to be this fine line between, do I sell out my product at deep margin reductions to turn it back into cash, or do I sit on the cash, have it impact my capital and also my distribution center, and then ultimately, as we come out of this, be able to, you know, bring in fall and holiday. It's a real conundrum for businesses that are not well capitalized to begin with.
Yeah, it's going to be rough. I think we've got about 10 minutes left. I think I'm going to turn it over to the Q&A and see what we have for questions here. There's one question that just popped up from past economic downturns, and Mark, I'll start with you on this. From past economic downturns, what actions were put in place that worked well and did not work as well as you had hoped?
I think, you know, preservation of cash, you know, is one thing that you hear, and so I'll take the side of, you know, what worked. I guess it's well, but being able to preserve cash as much as you possibly can, and when you think about it, what are the big P&L lines that are, suck of cash? It's the the cost of goods. So, getting out of products that, you don't think you're going to need and that you can, which obviously now pushes the problem down to the suppliers. And then, what we saw a lot of here, which was interesting because I don't remember, and I could be wrong, in other downturns, seeing, we definitely saw layoffs. I don't remember seeing a lot of, it just may be bad memory, of, people taking salary cuts at the, in addition to the, maybe the CEO, but I don't remember seeing it after 9/11, these blanket 10 or 20 or 30%, salary cuts. Maybe the other panelists recall that. But I thought that was a good way of keeping people working and not, totally encumbering businesses to say, look, we're going to pay you 100% of your salary, but you're the only person left. Everybody takes a little bit of a haircut. And then you can allow, many more people to stay employed and to keep your businesses going.
And Al, what did you see that worked well or did not work as well as you'd hoped?
Yeah, I'll agree with Mark's statement on the salaries. If you can manage to let go of fewer good people, and dance around that, even if it means everybody sharing in a little bit of the pain, I think that worked in the past. That certainly worked in 2008 in the situation I was in at that time. I think that's good. I think that learning from mistakes is important. I think you have to be very careful with long-term strategic projects. You certainly, everything is driven by whether you have the cash and you can afford to do it. But if you can avoid setting yourself back 3, 6, 9, 12 months on long-term projects that are really, really important, for things like, for example, meaningful website development, those kinds of things that are going to have a pretty immediate impact once they go live. You try to keep those things running, even if you have to delay or postpone other things.
In some cases, you've got staff that has the capacity to focus on that even more now than they would if you were up and running 100% day to day. Brian, what about yourself? What actions do you think worked well or did not work as well as you'd hoped?
Again, I was in a different situation where cash is king, right? And managing to cash flow is different than managing to EBITDA. And so, what in the past, managing the cash was key. Your EBITDA margins were negative, but you're generating cash. And that was, that last term, that's what we're focusing on, is just generating cash. So not too much else to add.
I got another question here about the USPS. So the White House is on record for not supporting funding. What should the industry do to support the USPS? Al, I'll start with you.
Oh man, that's a tough one. That's a difficult one. I don't really have a good answer for that, other than you have to drive through, unfortunately, the political system, as much pressure and lobbying as you can with the facts and how much of a segment of the economy is really dependent on that channel as a medium.
Mark, do you have any ideas on how to save the USPS?
No, I think you could deliver the mail in your local neighborhood, Brian, and save some headcount. But look, this is an age-old thing. I've been in the catalog industry since 1987. At various times in my career, and we talked about it then. There was lobbying for all these years, and it just hasn't substantially changed. And frankly, I've read a lot about this, and it came up in that catalog webinar. There's still too many physical buildings that the post office is operating. There's all kinds of politics associated with that, and union related issues. So until they can figure out what is really best and to make that organization efficient, I don't see any, near-term problem, solution to the problem.
Mm-hmm. And Brian, how about you? Do you see anything there?
That's above my pay grade, It's, yeah, efficiency, but yeah.
Al, I think you had something you wanted to add, didn't you, Al?
I did, and I just saw two of the comments come up, one from Paula Jeske and one from Ken Lane, both reminding me and everybody else, there's an organization out there, the American Catalog Mailers Association, that really does a great job of helping drive lobbying. And, like a lot of groups like that, they're under-supported and underfunded. They really do a significant, they provide a significant effort lobbying on behalf of the catalogers and the mailers that are out there. So that's my unabashed plug for that organization.
Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, they do a lot of good work. Well, we've used up basically the whole hour here. I appreciate everyone that tuned in to watch today's webinar, and I really appreciate the time from Al and Mark and Brian. Brian had to get up a little early this morning out on the West Coast to join us. Thanks again for your time and your insights. It's been very informative and insightful, and I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to join me today. So thank you again, and everyone be safe out there, and let's onward and upward from here.
Sounds good. Thanks for organizing.
Thanks for having us.
And Brian.
Brian.
Great. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.